I don't even tell people who I am. And so my growth is entirely on the basis of the content. I make people feel they're not crazy by what's going on. This is jacked. Everything that you're watching, this is not normal. This is not how it's supposed to go. And this is why. The people who are already bestsellers on Substack, they'll probably all be winners because they've demonstrated a couple of things that are key. They can build audiences and they can keep them. They can build subscriptions and they can keep those people. That is really freaking hard to do. Be focused on building that audience. Be focused on understanding what monetizes well. Think like a publisher. You are in business to reward people giving you their attention. Most people writing on Substack have a day job, to the point that people ask, what's your day job, right? Mm. And so the question then is how do you protect your superhero, identity on Substack from your day job if those two are in conflict? Now, sometimes they are and sometimes they're not. In my case, I don't think it's fair to have my writing connect suddenly to my business and by extension, my clients. And so there's that. Okay, so even if things were aligned, I don't know that I would necessarily make them aligned, but clearly they're not. I mean, the people that I deal with in the industry that I deal with are probably not as agitated about what's going on in life as I am, especially at the long memo. Who owns Substack piece? This is funny, right? It's one of our most popular pieces, or one of my most popular pieces. I literally wrote it on a whim. I wrote this piece in about an hour. And it was literally because people were like, Substack, the only thing not owned by billionaires. And I was like, are you people jacked? Of course this is owned by billionaires. And, and I get it, right? People are like, oh my God, the Trump's a jackass and the Wall Street Journal's in the tank and the New York Times is in the tank and, this and that. And so people come to Substack because you have this mix, right? You have people who really do know. Like in politics, Heather Cox Richardson, pretty tough to beat in terms of historical expertise. Bob Reich, tough to beat in terms of historical expertise. Olivia Troy, you see her on TV all the time. These people are all friends, by the way. Okay. So, and they kind of got me into Substack. And so I'm like, okay, well, why are you doing this? And they're like, well, because we can get our message out and it's unfiltered and we can directly interact with the public. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. Right. I mean, I had heard about Substack, but, as a guy in advertising, especially a guy that does digital advertising a lot, I get bombarded with new tech, social media tech all day long. All right. So I'd heard about Substack, but I'm like, it doesn't have an immediate advertising application, so I'm not really paying attention to it. So anyway, I come to Substack, I start writing, and I just wrote whatever I wanted initially. And this thing that came up was, Substack isn't owned by billionaires. And I'm like, well, that's dumb, because it is. It is now, and it will be. Okay, so that's what was the onus behind this piece. And since I work with companies and they want that aha moment where suddenly the guy with a big bag of money shows up and wants to buy whatever it is they've built, there is a process that they all go through. And I've been involved in digital publication for a very long time. And I'm sure there's a term you've heard. There's two terms I'm sure you've heard of. One is called digital sharecropping and the other is called enshittification, right? And those two ideas are related. The one thing I will say right now about Substack that I find is interesting is you actually can own your audience. You can download everyone's email. And if you wanted to, you could walk away from Substack and attempt to rebuild it somewhere else. Now, how well would that work outside of the ecosystem? I think you probably have to be a Bob Reich or a Heather Cox Richardson or somebody like that to pull that off. Okay, I don't think most people develop enough value to operate outside the Substack ecosystem alone. Maybe guys like the Bulwark could, Contrarian, but again, I would just point out these are all people too who have national audiences because of being on television for some period of time. Okay. Or they were public figures but my point is, so I'm a complete freaking unicorn. I come with no audience. I don't even tell people who I am. Right. And so my growth is entirely on the basis of the content. Okay.
100%.
Yeah. So I don't, now, yes, if I revealed my secret identity, would it matter much? It might, not. I mean, I know all these people, but I've been out of politics for quite some time, and I've been out of policy for quite some time. So it's not like this has been my game. However, you can just build an audience on the basis of content. That's pretty unusual for social media.
You say that eventually, like every social media platform follows the same pattern of consolidation and control. Do you see Substack as being fundamentally different in any way?
No. I mean, just to be blunt about it, no. Take a look who the investors are. The bottom line is that when the money is that big, everybody's ideals go out the window. Okay? Because in the end, they're driven by greed. All right? So you will see in politics, the whole idea of politics makes strange bedfellows. Yeah, the reason why they'll cooperate is there's a ton of money and power at risk, and they all want to get their hands on it. Okay? The reason why I think all these social media companies follow a predictable pattern is venture capitalism isn't some sort of noble altruistic activity. All right. Now, I've dealt with a lot of VC firms, and people think, oh, see, I'll come up with a better mousetrap and I'll go to a VC firm, or I'll go to, angel investors or whatever. And they'll see the meritocracy of my idea, and that's how I'll get funding. Well, that is totally bullshit. That is not how it works, period. Okay? Venture capitalism is interested in what they can bring to the table with their money, which is largely amplification of something that's already working. And then how are we going to get the hell out making 20 times what we put in? That's it. Okay. Now, there's lots of ways. Now, you don't seem convinced just looking at your expression, but that's the primary reason that at least all the VC firms I've dealt with, they're not in it for the mission. They're not in it for altruism. They're not in it to do good things. And you know what? That's okay, because that's not their mission. Okay. Their mission isn't change the world. Their mission is make a shit ton of money to justify the assets under management, period.
Yeah, I think I'm the kind of girl who would want to believe in their vision and their mission,
I get it. I get it. And that's why everyone's Substack isn't owned by billionaires. And I'm like, that's bullshit. It is, and it will be. Now, here's the thing. You don't want to kill the crop before it blossoms either. Which is why in the piece I was like, look, there is going to be this window. And if you go gangbusters, you will be one of the winners. There are going to be winners and losers. When the worm turns, there are going to be winners and losers. Okay, the people who are already bestsellers on Substack, they'll probably all be winners. Okay, because they've demonstrated a couple of things that are key. They can build audiences and they can keep them. They can build subscriptions and they can keep those people happy. That is really freaking hard to do. Mm. And so what Substack is doing is essentially crowdsourcing a multifaceted media publication that's going to have a ton of value down the road. Because I can guarantee you right now, Substack's tracking what you read, what you interact with. I can pretend with my name. I'd be super goddamn shocked if they haven't already figured out who I am for real, based on my writing, my behavior, everything else. Okay, so Substack's a massive programmatic data gathering machine on the one end with everybody who's interacting with it, because people are basically leaving all kinds of breadcrumbs everywhere in their notes, in their comments, what they like, what they don't like. So it's a data gathering machine on the one end. But you don't want to kill that because, as you pointed out, there are only 5 million paid subscribers or something like that, right? And that means what? There's like 50 million subscribers overall, somewhere in there, 40, 50 million, right? Okay, great. So you want that to keep going so you can continue to get the data, all right? And here's the best damn part. You and I, we're the dumb fools that are actually delivering the hard part of this equation, which is something that people want to pay attention to. That is the hardest part of this equation, and they've outsourced it. which is why, Substack is a brilliant idea. Okay, we're going to have all these people create all this content. We're going to take 10%, which is going to seem great to them because everybody else is even worse. But the real business I suspect they're in is data collection.
I've never thought about this, to be honest. Again, I was always, like I wanted to believe in the vision and their mission, as I shared. And this is, how I'm like selling and getting people on Substack, telling them this is why I think
Right.
this is so valuable.
And you're getting everything you want out of it.
However, the co-founders also said, that we are doing like the hard part. What they did was just like giving us the platform, giving us the payment structures and everything. But we are doing like the hard part because we're doing the writing. And as you shared, we are the one who like building and keeping keeping our audience there. And I love that you mentioned that this is like also like a superpower, that this really is a skill to become a bestseller on Substack. I think so too, because for instance, I started on Medium, I built an audience there, then I got on Substack because I believed, of course, in building an email list. As a marketer, how it's the most valuable asset in your business, and it's one, you level up if you focus on subscribers. That's why I think it's definitely a win-win, even if Substack takes this 10% cut, because it's risk-free. You get on the platform, like you don't have to pay anything. The moment you earn something, then Substack gets this 10% cut. But also, they're going to boost you in the background. They're going to somehow promote you. We have the leaderboards and so on and so on. Do you think that Substack's founders then truly believe in the long-term independence of the platform? Or do you think, it's just a stepping stone before selling out to larger interests then?
Well, look, I don't want to ascribe malice where stupidity might be a better explanation. So, no, I don't know what their real motivations are. I also think it may be irrelevant what their motivations are. Their initial motivations are monetary. Okay, that's why they're doing this. They were idea of, we're going to use tech and blah, 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 and we're going to accomplish this goal and everything. Substack's a pretty amazing product, okay, in that regard. But the question will happen at one point will be this, okay? When major media looks to move in, they get forced with picking winners and losers because real money comes on the line. That's why I'm like, the people who are already bestsellers are going to win. This day is going to come. The question is when. The people who've demonstrated that they're a good bet to build audiences and can consistently deliver valued content, well, that instantly demonstrates you as the wheat from the chaff. Okay.
How do you, as an ad expert, communications expert, and so on, how do you define value?
Okay. In the case of a media publication, which essentially we're all media companies, all of us that are writing on Substack, to get and keep the audience, you have to give them a reward. So at the base, at the primary level, that's the value. Now, there's a bunch of ways you can do this. And I think one of the people I pay attention to, I'm sure you know who she is, Sarah Fay, right? On Substack. So she's got here's their 8 models or whatever that you can use on Substack, right? You can teach people stuff, you can make them feel better, you can commiserate with them, etc. Right? So in any circumstance, what we're really talking about with value is the audience needs to get a psychological benefit from interacting with whatever you're doing. Now, that's true, by the way, for television. It's true, by the way, for radio. It's true, by the way, for newspapers. Thing is newspapers suck at it at the moment because nobody's in the habit of reading newspapers anymore. TV and radio have been taken over by the balkanization of digital media. But people love to go and watch their shows. Why are people going and watching Friends 20 years after it's off the air? Okay. Why are people watching Seinfeld 30 years after it's off the air in streaming networks, right? Well, because it's funny. Well, this is a true story. One of my girls comes to me and I'm playing Diana Ross and she goes, "Oh, I know her. I heard her on TikTok." I turned around and I said, "You got to be goddamn kidding me. She's got like 20 platinum records. She's one of the greatest recording artists of all time. And you know her because you heard her on TikTok."
Yeah.
Okay. Now, maybe I'm being too hard, but see, the channel isn't what matters. What matters is delivering the psychological result. I saw a kid, 16-year-old, walking around with a Rolling Stones t-shirt on. So I was like, "Hey, where'd you get that shirt?" right? And I forget, she is either H&M or Abercrombie. And I'm like, really? And then again, since I'm a dick, I go, do you know that group? Well, yeah, it's the Rolling Stones. And I'm like, okay. I mean, when's the last time the Rolling Stones were on tour? 20 years ago? 10 years ago? God, Mick Jagger's got to be what, 80? Although I would have told you, if anybody had told me Keith Richards was going to outlive Michael Jackson, I wouldn't have believed it as a kid. So what's the value? The value is how you make people feel, period.
Mm.
Do you make them feel better about themselves because they find agreement in what you write? Do you make people smarter? Can you solve a problem? Right? So the long memo and Read, Write, and Fled, I think, do two things, one better than the other. The first is I make people feel they're not crazy by what's going on. Because I'm like, I'm an expert. You're not crazy. This is jacked. Everything that you're watching, this is not normal. This is not how it's supposed to go. And this is why. Okay. And because the feedback I get from subscribers are, thank God somebody is writing something that I can access, understand. It makes sense to me. And I've heard it validates a lot of the feelings I've been feeling.
Mm.
Okay. Same with Read, Write, and Fled, but Read, Write, and Fled is about getting people knowledge, right? Because I had people ask, well, how do I open a bank account overseas? How can I get to Portugal? I'm looking at Jus Sanguinis citizenship through Italy because my background, are Italians. So I actually sent about 6 different people to Portal, Italy that I thought was really good after doing the research. And they were like, oh my God, thank you. That helps so much. They all became subscribers. That helps so much. That's how I decided to open Read, White, and Fled, because I was like, okay, well, clearly there's this demand for this knowledge and reinforcement. And so when I look at the people I subscribe to, I'm like, okay, what is the benefit I'm going to get to me? See, and I think this is where, having worked with a lot of content creators, having them understand why advertisers will give them money. Okay, because I'm on both sides of that. I've mentored creators, and then I've been the guy who's tried to buy their work. Okay, your ability to influence your audience is completely predicated on how bonded they are to you. And how well they're going to bond to you really is boiled down to the frequency and the feelings that they have in relationship to you, right? Then as an advertiser, if I'm going to give you money, it's because I want access to those eyeballs you control. Okay. The reason why you advertise on TV, we've talked about this. The thing that makes Substack unique is you actually own your audience. I can't stress enough how unusual that is. Okay. Medium, you don't own your audience. Facebook, you don't own your audience. Whatever the hell's left of that Gerbelian fever dream called X, definitely you don't own your audience, right? But Substack, you do.
Love this interview? You love the Online Writing Club membership. You get weekly masterclasses plus support from a community of writers who actually get you. They have the same pain points and needs. So join us today. What do you think about Patreon? Because I think with Patreon, this whole subscription model started. What do you think about this platform? Because now with Substack having these 5 million paid subscriptions, and now also, every quarter adding 1 million and having the vision, again, we're talking about vision, having the vision of reaching 40 million paid subscriptions, this is definitely not, you might remember the article from the New York Times, are we past peak newsletters,
Right. The whole subscription model, is it over? Right. Yeah.
It's not over. Now we're from creator economy, we're going to subscription economy, which I definitely think so. So now Substack is like the innovator, similar to Patreon, but at some point, maybe also the other social media platforms. I don't know whether Facebook would switch from followers to subscribers, but maybe ads also similar to LinkedIn, something where you can then gain subscribers suddenly. Or, of course, there would be new social media platforms which would offer then this subscription-based model, which I really, really like. So I'd love to know more about your opinion on Patreon, and how this whole subscription model or subscription economy started in your view.
Yeah, sure. So let's talk about Patreon first. Patreon, I think, was a neat idea, but Patreon is essentially the digital version of public television. If you really like Doctor Who, you could give us $50 and we'll give you a stupid tote bag. Or if you like Julia Child or whatever, right? So Patreon was like the digital version of that. in my opinion. Substack's different from Patreon because what Substack, I think, is correctly identified is most content creators suck at promotion and developing a real ecosystem. This is why I said to you before, I don't think many creators can go off on their own, even with their lists. Okay, because there's a lot of intangible, tangential benefits from the Substack community overall. People want to feel like they're part of the crowd. Now, I've dealt with a lot of businesses that essentially have this chicken and egg model of the value comes from when we have the community, but we don't get the community until we have the value, right? So Substack cracked that nut. They built the community, and then they said, okay, creators, you provide them value, essentially, right? So they jump started that process. Patreon was a way for predominantly, in my opinion, YouTube subscribers to finance the incredible costs associated with doing and being your own damn television studio, which is somebody who does this for a living. That's why I don't do video by and large. Audio is hard enough. Video is damn impossible unless you know what you're doing and have that experience. And even as somebody who has that experience and knows what should happen and knows how, I'm not going to invest $100,000 as a start, in a startup for a show that maybe has an audience, maybe not. Right. So I love these people that are like, hey guys, it's me and I'm on YouTube and here's my thing. And they build those. Awesome. Okay. And then eventually they do wind up getting into a mode where they do look like real television. Okay. Ages ago for our agency, I wrote a guide that I called Get Known, Sell Stuff. And I interviewed people like PewDiePie and Rosanna Panzino at Nerdy Dummies and all those guys. Their work at the beginning sucked. Their work in terms of production value. But they gave genuine content to a group of people that didn't really think that there was anything for them. But you look at those guys now, and they're basically doing television productions. It's shot on red, it's properly mic'd, it's properly lit, it's properly shot, which is great, but it didn't start out that way. Right? So they had to build the audience.
They had to build everything, and now they can, educate others on it. So this will be an absolutely new generation of YouTubers then.
Exactly,
now.
Right? But that's Patreon, in my opinion, made sense because damn, it's hard to finance and be your own television studio without getting 5% of the ad dollars. You need to get 100% of the ad dollars. I mean, you want to do a primetime television show. That's why 30 seconds of primetime costs $390,000. YouTube makes money through showing ads. And when you're going to do that, you have to then line up ad revenue to the highest intensity interest. Okay. And that's why YouTube makers tend not to do all that well initially, because you really have to build an audience that pays a lot of attention to you in order to make the financials make sense. Right. I mean, but all of this starts, I'm sure, maybe you're aware of this, maybe you're not, Kevin Kelly's article, right? 1,000 True Fans. Maybe your readers, maybe your readers know what I'm talking about, but they don't. But just to summarize real quickly, the idea was, well, if an artist has 1,000 true fans willing to give him some money, then that's usually enough for him to continue the art. So that's the model that kind of launches all this to begin with. Well, what we're finding out is getting 1,000 true fans that are really willing to give you enough money to be a patron is a full-time job in and of itself.
Yeah.
Right. So it sounds easy, right? But the 1,000 true fans model applied to television, for example. Okay, yes. How many people do you think watch an average cable news show? Now, you might have the actual answer since this is your field, but I'll ask it anyway.
I don't know, to be honest. Do you know it?
Yes. Let me ask you this. Do you think it's thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions?
In America, you mean?
Yeah, or wherever. It's actually pretty much the same all over the world.
Still, millions of people are using it. And then in addition, they have their subscription-based models with Netflix and Disney Plus and so on.
So when MSNBC goes on TV and they do a show, you think millions are watching. Fair enough. That's the answer I get most often. Your average cable news show at any one time has about 230,000 viewers.
Okay.
Assuming a building hasn't exploded, the White House isn't on fire, something like that, yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So think about how much effort goes into that. And that's the most they get at one time, is about 250,000 people.
So in Germany, it's similar,
Right.
I think in Germany, it might even be less, meaning like 70,000 or so. Because when you're, for instance, pitching a story into the media, then you're also getting, of course, the media data,
Right.
media analytics, and then you see exactly how many people you would have reached with this
Right.
piece in the
Right.
media.
So here's the thing. I mean, assuming that there isn't an explosion of some kind or something, it's between 200 and 300,000 viewers on any given show at any one time. Okay. And it's less during the day, right? The guys, a news hour, at noon and things like that, they're probably doing about half that, about 100, 150,000. Even when you're at that level, it's really, really hard to sustain big audiences. Okay. I know a lot of people look at the article I wrote, and it's funny. I get two types of responses. Oh my God, yes. And oh my God, I hate you so much, right? There's like nobody in the middle. Okay. Which is fine. The article's doing its job then, because even the people who dislike what I have to say are upset that they know that's how it's going to go, not that I'm wrong. At some point, Substack is going to have a choice. And what I'm saying is Substack's going to choose the real money. Because you asked me about, do I believe in independence? I think they will choose the real money because they're going to make it really hard for people who really do have audiences to say, yeah, screw it, I'm going to walk away. Because there's really only, at least in politics, the top 10 people on that leaderboard probably can go off on their own. Everybody else, in diminishing levels, is going to find it harder and harder to be their own talk show outside of the community of Substack. And Substack knows this. So did Facebook, so did, LinkedIn, etc. And there are divas in every one of these channels. So at the very minimum, there's going to be a strong financial motive for them to change. Do not discount the level of political pressure that may come down on Substack in the United States. By and large, Substack and Blue Sky are countercultural to the current regime's message. As a consequence, both of them are starting to be targeted by commentators and the administration itself. And so now, do I expect the FBI shows up on Substack's door and kicks the door in? Well, if you read my article about it, yeah, that day's going to come. Is that day today, tomorrow, next week? I doubt it. Okay.
Yeah.
But corporations tend to fold a lot faster than hold their guns in the face of legal and political pressure. And so even if Substack wants to remain independent, again, I may just be a jaded dick. My guess is they won't if the FBI comes knocking.
And in your opinion, what would be like the first red flag that Substack is shifting away from its writer first ethos?
Okay, so I wrote about this in the piece. I don't necessarily know the order, but I do know what to look for, right? The first one I said is there'll be a revenue squeeze. So the 10% might become 15%. Probably, actually, I'd be surprised if they dick with the commission. My guess would be you'll be pay for play for better placement in the algorithm. If I were advising them, that's the product I would roll out to generate more revenue. Okay? Because people like you and I probably will make that bet, because essentially what we're being asked to do then is to advertise our publications. Well, since we have audiences, that's not risky play for us, right? It's just a math problem. We got to sit down and figure out whether or not the juice is worth the squeeze.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Similar to Facebook ads,
Right,
there
exactly.
are so many people betting on Facebook ads, and now
Right.
of course LinkedIn is the next big thing because
Right.
they are the people who are having the money. Yeah.
Right. So people like you and I will say, well, does it make sense to give Substack, I don't know, 300 or 1,000 or whatever dollars per month to ensure we have premium content above the noise?
But how do you see now Substack Notes in this equation? Because I think Substack Notes is definitely a place where you can add or promote yourself.
I didn't appreciate how powerful notes were till I started playing with them more. I would not turn notes into ads. for most people. I don't think that's going to work. Well, but what notes give you is another opportunity to engage a quick hit of dopamine for the audience.
But what you could, for instance, do is with every post, you can now see, the post analytics. You can go into this and see, wow, this one converted lots of paid subscribers or subscribers. I could then pay, for instance, Substack a specific amount of money, and then they would push it, similar to, X or Facebook, where you can do this.
Boosting posts. Here's the thing. I don't know. Okay, well, if they were to do that, then the next thing would be how they change their algorithm, which is another red flag for me. But let's say you had that.
You were talking about this.
But let's say you had that. Let's say you could boost your note. I don't know that boosting notes that organically perform necessarily mean that they'll perform as an ad placement. Okay, now, I don't know, because it doesn't exist. What we're talking about doesn't exist yet, so I have no way of testing it. Just I know from other channels, organic reaction is different than attempting to get widespread audience, lookalike audience reaction. Okay, so I deal with this with clients, where clients come to me and they're like, oh, well, we have no problem selling, blah, blah, blah. Well, how do you get clients? Well, we get them through word of mouth. Well, duh, because they've shown up already sold. Okay, because they talked to their buddy who talked their ear off, who then said they should come talk to you, and then they bonded with you, and then, of course, you made the sale. That's a hell of a lot different than showing somebody a print ad and getting them to pick up the phone. Okay, so that's why I'm like, I don't know that boosting a note necessarily results in the same level of conversion as you get through your organic discovery. Because remember, what the algorithm's doing is it's connecting the people at the moment that they show the proclivity to want to interact with that type of content, your content. That's different than saying, hey, buddy, I got something to sell you.
You also said that they know exactly who we are, what we're doing. So our reading behavior is also tracked. Somehow, of course, they are doing this because now on the Explore page, where you can discover voices on Substack, you then cannot see only these 29 categories, with US politics and food and so on. You can now see 150 categories, meaning for me, since I'm interested in marketing and Substack knows this, I'm going to see, for instance, marketing there. Or others are interested in memoir, they're going to see memoir there. So I think this comes in handy, I'd say. At the moment, I like it, that somehow, I see what I want to read.
Because their real business is data gathering, not promoting your content. But keep going.
Yeah. Just wanted to say something positive again about this. I think you're more talking about this meta level, things we as small stackers, mid stackers might not really know about,
Sure.
And of course, somehow, no matter on which social media platform we are, also with Medium or with Facebook or LinkedIn, they try, of course, to sell us their vision and their mission. We have to have this vision and this mission. Without it, we might not believe in the platform. However, I know that you say that Substack follows a typical cycle of growth and control.
Right. Well, that's my prediction. I don't think they're the unicorn that breaks the cycle, would be probably the best way to characterize what I wrote.
Yeah. And what do you think then about this cycle? How does the cycle look? Where are we now? Are we now the early adopters, or where are we now in this
I thought your graphic was interesting, and it made me think about, really, is Christina right with her graphic?
Oh, yeah, with the early adopters, you mean?
Yeah,
the one I shared on
where you shared the thing, yeah, and I was
Linda replied to it. Let me check. Then Linda shared, I do think Substack is in its second inning. First inning was text, second inning is audio, video, live streaming, plenty of baseball left to play.
I would agree with that. I think Substack is right on the precipice between the early innovation stage and the scale stage. And it sounds like that's where Substack senses they are too. Okay. And I would agree with that. Okay. Substack is no longer a bunch of pissed off libs and wonky craft pages anymore. It's much broader than that. And it's funny because usually I come to the party late, but it seems like I came to the party just as it started getting good.
Oh, I have some confetti for you, but just I can't see your face here, but time to celebrate,
Time to
Yeah, because so
celebrate.
many people ask, Christina, am I like too late to the party?
No, I don't think
I
so.
should have started like 2 years ago. And I said, well, I started back then, but I was just playing around
Right.
and everything. And then last year I said, okay, I want to take it serious. I never thought that I would go from like 0 to 12,000 subscribers, which I think is amazing. And there are
Yes.
people who are having, you might know Dan Ochinski. Do you know him?
Mhm.
I'm going to have an interview with him. He also has like a newsletter about newsletters. Okay.
Mhm.
He's also on newsletter conferences and so on. And he has 10,000 subscribers. And I'm having now more subscribers than he has.
So noodle that. Why is that? I have more subscribers. I have more engagement on the long memo. I have as much engagement as the long memo as the Bulwark and Reich do.
Yeah,
on my stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I don't have as many subscribers, but there are a lot of people
it's about
who
an engaged
follow.
list. This is what it's
exactly.
about. Yeah.
So I have a lot of people.
It's about engaged list, a thriving list, a healthy list. This is very important. Otherwise, you're just like, this is like a bubble, and then at some point it's going to explode because you're just having like small or low open rates and low engagement and so on.
But it's great. You've got such an engaged and loyal audience. That's what Substack's ultimately going to prefer.
I think with your newsletter, it's amazing. For mine, since it's educational, but yours is like more.
I'm fighting in probably the hardest niche on Substack, and I'm still doing okay.
Do you really think?
Yes, politics.
Do you really think, especially
absolutely.
if you're talking about politics?
Politics.
Yeah, but
I think that because it's the most saturated. You've got well-heeled competitors. You do. You got well-heeled. I mean, I don't want to like break my arm, patting myself on the back. You got well-heeled competitors, and you have a lot of here's my idea on politics. I mean, if I had to guess,
right about that.
If I had to guess, the number one subject on Substack is politics. That
definitely
would be
is.
my
You can
guess.
go into the tech cloud and you can check it, and it's definitely politics. So also for Medium in the past, it used to be tech and politics.
That's right.
And for Substack, it's the same. That's why they also added some more categories in regard to politics because of the U.S. election last year.
Absolutely.
And also, when they announced they would have hit already these 5 million subscriptions now a few weeks back, or last week, I think.
Whatever,
it was
last week.
Then, so it was like, I was like, okay, first I like announced or I shared my opinion on these 4 million subscriptions, and then they came already there and saying like 5 million. This was freaking bonkers, I thought. And however, what the reporters or the media, top tier media said was that it was driven primarily with video, of course, or live streaming, because of TikTok,
Yeah.
Many people wanted to leave TikToks. They didn't know what would happen next with TikTok in 2025. Then we have these who want to like exit social media. And then what you mentioned with YouTube, people like sharing the recipes and everything on YouTube and like having these, as we talked about, like their own TV stations, but they couldn't keep up with it, having a team and everything around. And although they were creating all this content and they had a team around them, they still felt lonely because, it's just like this hamster wheel of creating content. And that's why they now are on Substack. And they said that one specific writer, and she said that it's only a small percentage of her subscribers from YouTube. However, these are the ones who sustain her business now. And so we both have like this white badge, and she's having already this orange badge, meaning she has thousands of paid subscribers. And this is then the moment we talked about with the 1,000 true fans, so she's having these true fans. However, it's not an overnight success. She built this. I don't know how many years she's been like creating content for YouTube. But again, I love this idea here.
Well, let me just give you this though. I find this tragic and amusing at the same time. John Cleese has to be one of the most famous comedians of the 20th century, from Monty Python and everything else. Yet the man only has hundreds of paid subscribers.
Yeah.
Which I said to him I thought was tragic. Okay. But anyway, I think we're in this phase where Substack is going to scale. I find it interesting, video and audio. I think video and audio is very niche, category dependent. I don't think, for example, that amateur radio and video will work for Substackers. The people that I see deploying it well and it adds value, it's at broadcast production level. I think if you can't meet that standard, you're hosed. Now, I've played with it for long Memo, and the interesting thing is can I produce at that level? Yes, I can. And I did. And I did professionally produced WNYC level podcasts that were radio shows. And my audience was like, I want to read, not listen.
Oh, okay.
I mean, they literally came out and told me that. And I was like, you're not interested in like additional content? And they're like, no, I like reading. And so I tried. I did like 4 or 5 episodes, which are not easy to do, but okay. And I like doing radio. So I focused on that first. But I think in politics, people have gotten used to seeing certain faces largely conditioned through television. And radio conditions that aspect of it. And so I'm not immediately convinced that somehow all these additional channels work on Substack. Now, granted, this is anecdotal. This is not research. It's not even wide anecdotal, right? But I could see, for example, cooking, gardening, stamp collecting, let's talk about coins, whatever. All that stuff is probably going to do really well multimodal. Okay, but news is probably not going to, since most people do not have the capability to match the expectation of studio production.
Yeah, or it's just, again, similar to what you're sharing, like just these like opinionated pieces,
Right.
Just, this is what happened right now in the White House, and this is what I think about it. So there are some coming from TikTok who are doing exactly this now on Substack.
They are. And like, for example, one of the people I follow who I like, who I've subscribed to and who I've paid attention to, Aaron Parnas in news.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, to a certain extent, he might be responsible for creating a particular genre on Substack about this is how you can do this and get away with it.
Yeah, you might write about this.
Okay.
Yeah, that he's creating
because Aaron's videos look like he's a hostage giving a video about why he should be released, right? He's either standing in front of a brick wall or he's like in his kitchen with a locked off shot, right? Yeah. I mean, it's not what you would expect, right? But his content is really, really meaty. And he's got an audience largely from TikTok that didn't have any preconception, in my opinion. And he's like, I'm going to tell it to you straight. I'm going to give you the news straight. And here's an unbiased, unfiltered, quick 5 minutes, pow. This is what's going on. Okay. He's the only guy I've seen that can beat the mold of a professionally produced show. Because like when I see, for example, one of the guys I'm subscribed to, Andrew Wiseman, right? He's an exceptionally accomplished attorney, teaches at NYU law. I don't know if he remembers me. We met ages back when he was at the FBI. He does the whole here I am in my living room routine, and he gets 1,500 people watching it live. Now he writes his stuff and he gets a gajillion people interacting with it. He goes on NBC, of course, a national television audience. It's signals like that I look at. And I'm like, this multimodal, multimedia content is probably going to be niche driven. So I guess I would say, look, play with it. See if it's what your audience wants. My audience wants highly finished written pieces for whatever it's, and here's the thing too. The rules are you shouldn't write long pieces. Well, geez, for me, a short piece is 3,500 words.
Yeah.
And yet they still get read. Okay. So, I guess my thought to people as a creator is do your best, create your best work, see how the audience reacts to it.
Yeah, and I love this that you say, play with it. So Substack is giving us the tools. We can do with it whatever we want. We can become these multimedia writers building this multimedia business empire.
Right.
I see many who, joined from Medium, now help them get on Substack, and now they are thriving, maybe also sharing their opinion on politics and so on and so on. And they are definitely playing with it. So with notes, and then they jump on a live. They are doing podcasts. They are doing voiceovers. I love this because I love it if you're going like beyond the written text. Just also for yourself, because you're talking about your audience, and of course it's nice to know the needs of your audience and what your audience wants. However, I think you are also at a point in your life where you're saying, okay, but I also want to do. I want to do what I want, If you would be like happy about doing voiceovers, because I love your voice, so I would say, wow, add a voiceover to your
it's
stories.
It's funny. I've actually had
people.
I've had people suggest I should do voiceover work. I work with enough professional voiceover actors. Yeah. It's acting, okay. But I will say this, okay. Look, right now I'm saying experiment. I don't care what the channel is. There's every sitcom on television today follows the formula from Lucille Ball and I Love Lucy. Why? Because that formula worked. Now, did Lucille Ball know that when they started doing the show? No. Every talk show looks like Johnny Carson and The Tonight Show. There were there were hosts before Johnny Carson, and obviously there are hosts after Johnny Carson. They all suck. But that show is done a very specific way. And every show that wants to compete with it is done exactly the same way. Why? Because everybody realized, wow, Johnny Carson really figured out how to do this. When the media was young, nobody knew what to do. Even Johnny Carson had all kinds of like flops. He did magic tricks and all kinds of stupid other shows before ultimately becoming the Tonight Show host. Substack's there right now. No one knows what the magic formula is to work for any given niche. So there's lots of experimentation going on. I go back to, YouTube, where everyone's like, they've got their music, wah, 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 and they come on, hey guys, right? It's all formulaic now. Well, you know who's responsible for that? Casey Neistat, by and large. Okay, because he was the one who figured out this is how you do long form content on YouTube. And now every person that does it is essentially following Neistat's formula, whether they understand it or not.
Yeah, that's why you're seeing, similar also to Substack now, you're seeing like this same old all the time now.
Yeah, right? Because YouTube, in politics... You're seeing
this on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Yeah, but in politics, for example, which is the one I pay closest attention to, everyone was like, I'm going to tell you what to think today. Part of the reason why the long memo, I did it the way I did it, I didn't know it would work. But I did it the way I did it because I'm like, hey, okay, here's an idea. Why don't I just tell you how things are and how the players are behaving and why they're behaving that way? And I'll give it to you from an analytical perspective, and I'll let you figure out what to think. That is not how most political newsletters, stacks, whatever the heck you call this, go. It's, I'm an authority, and here's what you should believe.
You're right about this. You should do this, not that. You should believe this, not that.
And so I was like, okay, there's a gap here. And, my experience was, look, I had to present to presidents and cabinet officials and members of Congress and foreign governments and foreign leaders. Here is the situation. Here's the relevant information. Here's what I recommend. And then the question would be, okay, either they thought that was a good idea or that wasn't. And if they wanted more information, they'd ask me for more information. That's the model I use at the long memo. It seems to be useful. I think that's why I went from 0 to 5,000 subscribers in 6 weeks. Okay.
Wow.
I think it's 6 or 7 weeks, but yeah, we get about 100 new subscribers a day.
How many paid subscribers do you have already?
I'd have to look. I think it's 150.
Wow. Yeah. That's amazing.
I don't know if that's good or not. I mean, I like it because I'm like, woo, wow, my hobby's paying for itself. Awesome.
I think it's amazing because, as you shared, you're staying anonymous. Right. No one knows who you are. Of course, you're sharing some like puzzle pieces of who you are to make it a bit more, exciting. Let's go like this.
Right.
And then with your stories, of course, like these are like trending topics, maybe. You can then piggyback on specific things going on in politics and so on. However, as you shared, you're adding your opinion. You're making yourself also like vulnerable because, you know, of course, you're sharing. If I would write a lot about politics or so, I would always be a bit afraid that someone would like find out about my address, which is super easy on Substack if it's connected with Stripe and you don't have a business address or so.
Right, which I do, which is, again, I mean, me being anonymous is not to commit fraud of any kind. I don't want Google automatically linking my name with my other businesses. I think vulnerability is required. People connect to people, not to brands.
Subscribe to the Online Writing Club and connect with more than 12,000 soulful writers who are building their writing careers just like you. It's where serious writers grow no matter in which season they are. More than 12,000 writers have already joined. What are you waiting for? Subscribe to the Online Writing Club today and take your writing journey to the next level. As with all the other social media platforms, you have already like a vision how this is all going down. Let's go like this. Or tell us
You make
how
me sound like the bad guy. I'm just pointing out how history works. But anyway.
You're not the bad guy. I wanted to have this interview, or of course we wanted to do the live, but then I thought, okay, there is so much like value value in it. We have to talk about this, even if it's something different to what I usually like share with my audience. However, it definitely will make people think about their Substack strategy or about platforms in general. So I'd like to know, we were talking about this cycle, and let's say Substack would go down. We were talking about that they would have these algorithm optimization, for instance, and many, many more like red flags they could add in the next like weeks or months or years. Let's call it like this. However, how would Substack then go down? Okay, what would happen then? Because we also started talking about billionaires. And do you think still there is a way for Substack to break the cycle? Or is it inevitable that it goes down?
My thought is, I'll deal with the first part. And it's not going to go down the drain. I do think it's inevitable that they will corporatize. One of two things will happen. They'll either corporatize or go bankrupt. Look, Facebook's still around. It went through the split and survived and became much bigger and more corporate and publicly traded and everything else. My kids don't want to go on Facebook. They're like, that's for old people. They're on TikTok. They're on, whatever. Okay. So what happens? Well, a lot of the people who feel disaffected by whatever Substack does, they're just going to move on to another competitor. And that's going to actually be one of the signs that things are changing. If a true peer competitor, like if all of a sudden, I don't know, Medium gets its act together and can really challenge Substack or Ghost, right? I've had a lot of people, this is why you should use Ghost. Well, I looked at Ghost.
Or Beehive.
Or Beehive or whatever. And I'm like, okay, well, that's all great and everything, but they're missing the component of community. Which
100%, yeah.
Which is, again, I think unless you're like one of the biggest names there are in your niche and you can truly stand on your own, that's pretty tough. Substack will moderate, corporatize. People call this enshittification, right? They'll become more corporatized. The revenue will become too high to ignore, and they'll work on protecting it. So they'll go from growth mode to a more balanced sustainment mode. Does that mean it's awful for people? No, not necessarily. Right now, Substack's the Wild West. Okay, if you continue to be successful, eventually urbanization comes. When big media moves in, when content moderation starts happening, when the algorithm starts changing, it's going to shift its focus away from being an indie movie shop to being Paramount Pictures. That doesn't mean they're going to stop making movies. Just every stupid old script isn't going to get the same treatment as it did years back. So right now we're in this sweet spot where this is why I'm like, look, this isn't going to happen overnight and it's not going to happen right away. But like I use this from The Sun Also Rises. Slowly at first, then all at once. That's how the switch is going to happen. My guess is it's a year to two away from where the beginning of the end happens. When they get to the middle of that graph you posted, that's when things are going to switch. When they get past the early adopters and they are now a mainstream publication, that's when they're going to start acting like it.
Have you heard that Substack also won an award from SimilarWeb? This marketing tool which helps you to analyze websites. So it's one of the fastest growing websites in the US.
Right.
And the app is growing by 139%. And it has also one of the biggest cross-platform growth because of, the Substack on desktop and the Substack on the app, which I think is amazing. Also, on the download charts, Substack is now often, here, and then comes X and so on,
Right.
So it's getting, I think, and also, of course, in America, it now belongs to the top websites in America,
Sure.
and it also is already, let's call it like a thought leader in like media. Yeah, it's, I think, news and media category.
Absolutely,
So
because you start seeing
I,
Substacks being referenced in broadcast
yeah,
television news.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And before it was like, Substack, something like this.
Right.
Even F. Williams, the founder of Medium, who was before that a co-founder of Twitter, he said in an interview, we are having this amount of subscribers, and they have just like this amount of subscribers, something like this. And now Medium just has these 1 million paid subscriptions, and Substack has these 5 million subscriptions with this huge growth. So I think it's really, really growing fast. It's massive. If you're like seeing this graph, how fast this could go.
The only thing that might break their cycle is if they realized not turning into a walled garden is the way to protect what they've built. That's going to be a really tough sell, I think. Right now, it's working because there are lots of people writing. Even if they only get a small number of subscribers, that's new subscribers. There's a lot of value, micro value being generated, et cetera, et cetera. But what could happen is somebody stands up in the boardroom and goes, hey, look, the system we built is working. Why the hell are we going to screw with it and try to become, I don't know, some sort of crowdsourced version of the New York Times? And I could see that being a legit discussion that they have. The problem is that if you want to really make real money, you're not going to do it in $5, $8, $10 a month increments across a jillion platforms. You're going to make it because Coca-Cola says, here's $400 million in order to advertise on Substack. Well, to do that, you got to then really deliver an audience of eyeballs. I mean, look, you saw it with Facebook, you saw it with Instagram, you saw it with, well, before Dorsey sold Twitter to, you know, the Elon Musk, you had to actually put in safeguards, standards and practices. I mean, all these things that, you really want the real money. Nobody wants to see their ad for Carnival Cruise Lines next to an article that says, here's why cruising sucks, right? So that's why I'm like, okay, so they're going to have to decide, do we like the revenue stream we got and it's delivering enough ROI that we don't want to change? Or do we think the grass is greener getting advertising dollars? And every social media channel thus far has gone to ad dollars. Now, I will say, thinking about the article and thinking about what you're asking me, Substack is different in that it always started out with some degree of pay for play, where no other social media channel, as I'm thinking this through, ever has. Is that enough to change the trajectory? Well, as we've been sitting here talking about it, I am thinking about it going, okay, maybe. But that's what I think then it comes down to. Do they think that the pay for play system they have right now is better than what they may see as the grass is greener if they go the ultimate IPO route? And if they're going to IPO and, try to get gajillions of dollars, they're going to have to show they've got a real revenue stream that's going to make that price to earnings ratio make sense. And it's tough to kind of argue, well, what we've built is a cadre of millions of writers, each getting $6 a piece or whatever. And we take 10% of that. I mean, how would I value that as Wall Street? Right? I mean, that's why I'm like, at some point this is going to change. Now that said, I'm not saying don't take advantage of it. That's literally why I was like, look, make hay while the sun is shining. It's going to eventually have to change somehow, but right now, it's like one of the best fields I've ever seen to go plant some seed corn in. Because most people that want to create something, they're never going to get an opportunity to have this level of exposure to millions of people.
I also think with this built-in audience, this is amazing. And I can remember when I joined Substack in December 2020, I was also amazed by its built-in audience. This is like a mall. People go there to shop, they browse, and you can then be like a shop, or you can be like a brand in a shop, and so on, which I love. Otherwise, you might not be seen, and it's all about getting seen.
Absolutely, right?
Um, yeah, so I'm also like curious what's gonna happen next. So you might notice from Medium, Medium, the only constant on Medium is change. It's changing all the time. Now with Substack, I also have the feeling that the only constant is change, because they are shipping so many new awesome, of course, features, and then you can decide whether you want to use them or not. So yeah, it's similar to Notes. Similar is in April, Notes will turn 2 years old, so it's then a full on toddler. So yeah, you want to. It's yeah, for the co-founders, I think Substack is their baby, and of course they want to grow it, and they started this in 2017, so they are now in it for like 7 years. So Substack is 7 years old now, which I think is the time where you can then go to elementary school. So yeah, I'm also very curious what's going to happen in puberty and so on, whatever comes next, if we're comparing this to a life of a human being. And yeah.
There's a couple of things I think that create problems for Substack. The first is product differentiation. There's so many good Substacks to read.
Mm.
Getting paid subscribers, you do hit a wall. Now, I see this in politics where I have people like, I love your Substack, but I'm already spending $300 a month or
Yeah,
whatever,
I know
right?
this
And so there's,
subscription fatigue.
yeah, there is a
Subscription
subscription. There
fatigue.
is a subscription
Yeah.
fatigue that sets in, right? So honestly, I'm curious and paying attention, as I think you are. So when Rachel Maddow and Joy Reid and all these people come in, just how many people do fall over themselves?
Mm.
Okay. I honestly believe that as a percentage, they will do worse than people nobody have ever heard of. Okay. Because people coming to Substack and doing subscriptions are not looking for the same old, same old. They don't want to see
Mm.
MSNBC on Substack. I think big media trying to come into Substack, we'll see what happens. The right strategy would be to have somebody actually have a clue, who understands how the channel works, and adapt the content that MSNBC makes to the Substack audience. That said, I'd be pretty much willing to bet all the money in my pocket, which is more than $10, that is not what's going to happen. They're going to take the same shit they always make and try to cram it into Substack. And the reason why I believe that's the case is that's what they always do. That's what they did with YouTube, right? The only company I can think of that actually effectively figured out how to leverage YouTube was Old Spice. Otherwise, everybody else just runs their stupid 30-second commercial on YouTube. I think big media coming in, they may not get the advantage they think they want or that they have coming into this channel, because Substack is its own community, and the Substack readers and participants have a different expectation than they have from broadcast media channels. That's a good thing, by the way, for people who are like, hey, I want to grow my Substack. Okay, it doesn't mean that suddenly the New York Times can walk in and own the place. Now, they can if they eventually get their act together and figure out what real business they're in and then adapt that to Substack. Or they make a deal with Substack and Substack builds the back end architecture for somebody like the New York Times, which I've seen various media channels have Substack as their back end and they don't look like Substack, which I'm like, wonder when this is going to get rolled out. I just have a suspicion it's pilot programs that they're trying with certain media producers. I think right now is in its infancy. Substack is trying to find its way. It will eventually draw real attention because, let's say, so 5 million paid subscribers, 50 million subscribers, right? When Substack crosses that 100 million, 150 million, 200 million overall subscribers, well, now it's a no kidding, super real social network with real eyeballs. And no media company is going to ignore that.
And what they are definitely doing, especially on Beehive, they are using ads and they are earning money with ads, okay, in their newsletter. So what do you think about offering this ad space in my newsletter and accepting sponsorship offers? Are you a fan of this, or would you rather say that we should promote our own product there?
I guess my reaction and comment and strategy is curate. Okay, so on my Substack, and I know you got, and I appreciate you saw that this was a good idea. I only recommend 5 at a time so that I give them actual weight, and I curate based on who matches what I know my audience is interested in. Okay. I mean, the recommendation is essentially an ad. Okay. And so
Yeah.
if you want to provide
Yes.
additional, so the recommendation idea I have, the posts, I listen to my readers. They tell me what they're reading. I amplify that. Okay. And that's all done to curate, to build value. If you want to do that with your other email lists, that's fine. And you should. And my recommendation then is think like a publisher. What provides additional value? The ad's not an intrusion if it's something that they would be interested in.
Yeah, sure.
So as an ad agency executive, I will tell you that in part the reason why I've been able to negotiate prime position in shows, print, etc., is those publications and media companies know that the stuff that we are going to produce is going to complement the activity they're engaged in. Okay. So I don't know, let's say you do your newsletters on fishing. Rapala wants to be your guy, not a problem. If anything, helps probably, increase your brand credibility. Okay. Budweiser wants to advertise. Maybe that's a tougher call. Okay. You see where I'm saying in terms of like
Yeah,
product
sure.
market fit between the
Yeah. Yeah.
advertiser and your audience,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I would just be mindful of that. I think you can always do that, but everything that you need to do as a content creator, you need to think like a publisher, and you're the editor of your publication, and your email is a publication. So if you're going to put ads into it, I mean, and I'll tell you, very precious few people do this. Most people are basically just whores. You got the money, there's your ad, pow.
Yeah. Well,
Right?
so
So
that's
what?
why I'm asking you
So
as an
so you
expert.
get,
Yeah.
yeah. So you get this like hodgepodge. Now, so when I used to buy YouTube influencers, or if I do an influencer strategy, okay, as an ad executive, the pitch that I make to the client is you have a very specific audience, and this guy actually has all those eyeballs collected. And so if this guy does your ad with you, you would get more engagement than if I just went and bought a print ad in Car and Driver, for example. Okay, so there's this one guy I used to advise and work with, and he was all about cars and turbo boosting and cars and engines. I mean, okay, whatever. My partner's into that, but I'm not. But okay, fine. And so I would help, I helped clients work with him because I was like, it's better to work with him. And they'd be like, yeah, but he's only got like 150,000 people. He said, yeah, but it's 150,000 car nuts. Okay, so if you give him content, you're better off on this. Now, one guy, I'll tell you where I learned this from. The guy I learned this from was Scott Monty when he was the executive in charge of social media at Ford. He had a really good instinct to pair Ford's products with the right influencers. Okay. And so as a result, I'll bet you Scott probably delivered better ROI than the ad agency, which was probably like, Dentsu or somebody like that, than they did for Ford, even though the budgets were smaller and everything else. So if you're going to do all that,
Yeah.
I think you can totally do that. Be
Mm.
mindful not to, look, you work so hard to get these people to pay attention to you. The last thing you want to do is send them away to somebody
Yeah.
else.
That's yeah. So for instance, what I'm seeing, as I'm of course connected with other, let's call it like creator, and also sharing like educational stuff, and then always asking myself, if you're sharing this educational stuff, and it might also be something that you could create and offer then as a mini course or whatever, why are you then promoting others? If you're doing this as a
Fair
collab,
enough.
it is fine.
Fair
But if
enough.
it's just like these affiliates, just here is
Right.
this course, and I would definitely buy it, and you've never watched it, you might not just have like the connection
Yeah,
to this
and
person, I
by
would
the
always
way, I
be
don't know how it is in
careful.
the EU. That's actually illegal to do in the United States. You can't recommend a product and be consistent with Federal Trade Commission rules and say, "I
Mm,
love this product. I use it." You do something like that, and you actually are making fraudulent statements. You're in trouble.
mm. Yeah, I think it's more like I know these creators and I believe in these
Right, but if you
creators.
give
They
a
believe,
personal endorsement, it has to be
yeah,
genuine under U.S. law.
yeah, 100%. Again,
Yeah,
I'm not doing any affiliates,
I'm not. I'm
nothing
not.
like
I'm
this.
not passing judgment on you. I'm just telling you that that's how it
Yeah,
works in this country. But yes, I mean you're
yeah.
absolutely right.
You have to be careful with affiliates.
Right.
Similar to Medium, there are so many people, adding affiliate links and yeah, they're earning money with affiliate links. However, it's unethical. You can't do it that way.
Yeah, it's
That's why I'm asking
unethical.
you.
And why would you want to betray your audience? Because it took
Yeah,
so hard for you to get the guy in the first place. Why do you want to do something to
love it.
piss him off?
Love it. Yeah, and then also, as you shared, why, if you know what your audience wants, why aren't you
Just making it.
creating your own
Yeah.
products, your own offers? Why
Right.
are you sending them somewhere? But of course, I get it. Many are having a 9 to 5, or I don't know, working till 12 or so, and then for their passion project. So of course, we don't have the time. Similar to me, then I just like have this, but it's for everyone.
Right.
Everyone has just tries to do it like in the cracks of times. If he's on
Hence,
Substack, except he's someone and who
just
can like
curate. Just curate. That's
put a
all I'm
lot.
saying.
Curate. I
Curate.
love it. Yeah,
Give
you're right
them
about.
the best of what then will help them.
Mm. Yeah, you're right about that. And then also, for instance, maybe because I, for instance, was approached by someone last year and I was so pumped. But then I was thinking about, okay, can I actually deliver on the promise? Meaning, can I actually pump out one podcast per
At
week?
least you thought that through and didn't just jump off. So you get bonus
Yeah, yeah,
points for
yeah.
that.
That's the reason, and that's why I then somehow like ghosted them. And then I offered another friend, a creator friend. I said to him, hey, if you want to, you can get this deal, But he also wasn't so sure about, I don't know what exactly, but yeah, for me it is always about, if I'm thinking about this more on a professional level, if it would be in corporate, of course, if I would recommend someone to start a podcast, I'd say, of course, we have this content plan, and we're having already like 2 months in advance content here for you, and with if you're doing this part time and also like in the evening, as here in Germany, with almost 10, then it's not so easy because maybe you're super sleepy, you have to stop, the kids are crying, whatever. So
Right.
yeah, this was like mine, and I love it that you said curated. It's not about, because there's, for instance, passion fruit. You might notice that many people now connect their Substacks to passion fruit. It's nice. This is also, they have a built-in audience. I think the built-in audience is getting bigger and bigger, and now then newsletter writers can then find like their tribe, like, yeah, companies or services that would fit to their newsletters. However,
Right.
I would always say be careful, because this is just like short-term success. Maybe you make $500, $1,000, or maybe even with YouTube you can make that, $10,000s, of course, with a video you do. However, it's still a lot of work. Especially, for instance, with YouTube, where you're creating, a video for someone, for instance, and then it's going, about all these feedback loops, la la la, and briefing calls and so on and so on. And with Substack newsletters, it might be, or newsletters in general, it might be like easier. However, you can burn yourself, because some you might recommend someone that might not be legit, let's go like this, or you burn yourself in another way, that you're just limiting yourself by not offering this service or this product yourself at some point, and then you send them already to a like high ticket offer, for instance, for $500 or so, although you could then also at some point do this. Yeah, so I think this is very important with curating.
But don't feel so bad about not making it yourself. There are things that you're good at, and there are things that other people are good at. Obviously, I know a lot about writing and marketing and everything. That doesn't mean I'm going to suddenly compete against Christina.
Yeah, no.
Okay, so I got things I'm focused on, but when if people were to come to me, oh hey, I want to grow my sub. Well, okay, so here's someone I think you should look at.
Yeah,
Okay, I mean, there's no point in trying to
yeah,
chase every rabbit. So that's why I'm like,
100%. Yeah,
just curate and give people the
great.
best and do what you do best.
Mm.
So you don't have to feel bad that you don't put the products together. You're not expected to, I joke, at least with the long
Mm.
memo. People are like, well, you left this out, you left that out. I said, look, it's called the long memo, not the tome. I'm not going to tell you everything about everything that I know.
You want writers to stack like there is
No
no tomorrow.
tomorrow. Yeah.
What concrete steps do you recommend writers take to protect themselves from this inevitable, or your prediction for the future, platform shift?
Okay. Well, My thought is when I say to people, be serious then about your audience. Be serious about growing your audience. My admonition is that this notion, oh, it's not owned by billionaires. Well, A, that's not true, and B, it's not going to be as good as it is now forever. Okay, and I had more people respond to that than anything else. Well, how long do I have? Well, I don't know. Assume you have until tomorrow. Okay, now realistic, I think all of 25 you're good. I think probably through most of 26 you're good. I think after the midterm elections you're on borrowed time. Okay, since politics is one of the largest subjects that's going to drive this, be focused on building that audience. Be focused on understanding what monetizes well. Okay, now I'm not saying you just become a whore to whatever makes money, but the whole, you think like a publisher. You are in business to reward people giving you their attention. Period. There's this book maybe readers are interested in, and it's called "Will It Make the Boat Go Faster?" Okay, I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's by Ben Hunt Davis. I use this with clients. There's also the notion of the theory of constraints, right? Which is you set this large objective that you think is impossible, and then you're like, well, if it were possible, how would I make that happen? And in that logic of thinking, you realize what are the real constraints that are keeping you from getting from one goal to the next. Okay. You combine that with will it make the boat go faster? The idea of will it make the boat go faster was the Olympic team for Australia, right, wanted to win crew. And so it was like, well, should we train more? Well, I don't know. Will it make the boat go faster? Well, should we eat donuts? Well, I don't know. Should it make the boat go faster? What if we use wax on the boat? I don't know. Will it make the boat go faster? Right? So when you get that level of clarity, suddenly everything acts as a filter real quickly. So I would say, will it get you more subscribers and will they like you more? That would be the first thing I would use. And then if you're like, well, I want 100 million subscribers by the end of the year. Okay, well, I don't think that's possible even for like somebody like, Heather Richardson. But let's say she were to ask that question and I were to do this exercise. I'd be like, okay, so that means you need to get 10, 15 million subscribers a month, which basically means you'd have to grow all of Substack at a rate they've never seen for the last about 3 years. Okay, so how are we going to do all that? So those are the constraints. How are we going to do all that? Now, the answer may still be, well, we can't get there from here, which sometimes happens. But for most of, I think, your listeners, they have these goals. I want to be making X dollars. I want to be doing this. I want to be doing that. I want this level of growth or engagement or whatever. Okay, great. So what has to happen then in order to make that happen? And as a result, you're going to get then your filter question of will it make the boat go faster? And then do that. I ask a simple question with respect to the long memo, which is this something that will make people more intelligent in understanding the world around them? If the answer to that question is no, I don't write on it. Because God knows in politics, there's about 30 things a minute that are just so outrageous I could write clickbait on. As it is, I already write like 3 or 4 times a week, and I write, 5,000 word articles plus. So basically, I'm writing close to a novel weekly in my Substack. So if I were gonna chase that down for everything, I'd be like that. I have to give up what I do for a living and do just that. Okay. That's not what I'm going to do. But I ask myself, look, is this something that people need to know? And by knowing and understanding how it works, is it going to make their lives better? Are they going to be better informed? Are they going to be able to make better decisions? If the answer to that question is yes, then I write on it. Now, why is that the question? Well, I asked my readers what they're actually most interested in and what they're most confused about. So, you want to Substack and build that audience and make a ton of people? My thought and the strategy I'm pursuing is, okay, I have an objective as to how big I'd like the Substack to be. Now that it actually turned into something. Initially, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to write whatever the hell I want, whatever, maybe it's catharsis. But now that the thing is actually working, I'm like, okay, wait a minute, I got to actually figure out now where I'm going to drive this boat. So I do have an objective in mind about how many subscribers I want and what I want them to do and the level of engagement and everything else. And then it becomes, okay, so what are the things I have to do then every day to do that? for your readers, there are those questions. There are those questions and there are those constraints. So if you want to stack like there's no tomorrow, well, then get serious about acting like a publisher.
For someone who feels like their big dream is out of reach, tell us what's one thing you can do today to take a step toward it. As a publisher, how important do you think then, except what Substack is already doing for us with the boost and the leaderboard, and also with these rewards you shared that they're giving us, how important is for us to market and promote our newsletters?
Well, if I'm any indication, it doesn't matter at all, because I can't without revealing my secret identity. So, so there's that. However, again, I think I'm a unicorn in that. If I'm being honest, I think it's important to promote outside of Substack for most people. Share your passion with wherever the audiences are. If it's Reddit, if it's other chat groups in Substack, think about how the best in the business do this. They have long form content that then they cut up and share in multimodal channels. And so why shouldn't you do that as well? Now, I have no doubt my growth is less because I'm not doing that. Yes, I've got a lot of success and I've got a lot of interest and everything else. And it's purely done on the basis of the strength of the content. But I know that it would amplify and go faster if I did drop it into other channels.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah, but you have to keep in mind that many were already like building these multi-platform audiences, and then they decided, to shut everything down and then just go on Substack.
I would never
because
do
Substack
that.
feels home.
I would never do that.
And that's exactly what I wanted to ask you, because I think, again, it is very important to also, again, then go beyond Substack, because we never know where Substack will be in a year or in two from now. So I think that's why our conversation was so valuable for everyone. And also, we should really write with the end in mind. So now we have this huge built-in audience. And maybe if you're, I don't know, spending hours. So I have many tribe members spending hours on when to go, for instance, paid on Substack. So my recommendation now is go paid right from the start. You can also offer everything for free, but you can let people support you, or if they say they love this.
And that's what I did too. I started off right from the start. Yeah. And I agree with that.
I think this is super important because we have these 5 million subscriptions. This is amazing. And then also something that we didn't talk about, but of course with Patreon, we were talking about this somehow. But if you're looking back, then an email list, the idea was that an email list would always be free. So you would offer value, again, this value aspect, where we were in this interview already very tangible what value is for your specific newsletter then. So the value, you would provide value, like 90% you would offer for free. And then you would say, hey, if you want to level up, then you're going to get these 10%, this 10% that I'm only going to share with you, like this on more strategic level, and then not just like tactical level, on a more strategic level. And for this 10%, you're going to have to pay. Or then also like, let's say this 1% here, this is then a high ticket sale for $5,000. So this was the idea. And now with Substack, people are so focused on paid subscriptions. And I'm now also saying, hey, like the broader picture, you can write a book. People, you can build an audience. This is the most important thing. You can build a community. You can write a book based on your stories. You can also serialize a book, you can do this, that, coachings, you can do online courses. And this is the cool thing. And this is how you then build your Medium empire. And of course, it's somehow like hosted then on Substack. However, you're building something that you own. And I think based on the interview, I would also now recommend everyone. Of course, Substack is an awesome space. I love it. And I would also call it my home because I spend, as Substack then might know, most of my time on Substack, of course, and not on the other social media platforms, which leads then to the fact that on Medium, for instance, I'm just publishing whenever I have to publish on Medium. Because, of course, if you're a part-time writer, or I know how I would do this on a like more professional level in a corporate world. But as a part-time writer, I can't do this. So, of course, you would then, as you shared, say, this is one piece of content, and then I'm publishing it there and there and there, everywhere, to be everywhere and amplify my message. 100% sure about this. I think that's why this conversation was so valuable, to really, think about your Substack, or rethink your Substack strategy, and also think about, or write with the end in mind, because maybe at some point, Substack will maybe be mainstream, or maybe like die, similar to Medium, where people like right from the start said, is Medium dead? This was in 2020. They are still saying it. Medium isn't dead. I see tribe members earning lots of money. Others don't. Others build their audience. Others don't. It always, as you said in the beginning, it always depends on your content. And I love that you are building everything now from zero to 4,000 or 5,000 subscribers based on your content. So I think with Substack, anyone can do this if the content is good. And it's also about originality. You want to provide unique and original content. I think this is what you're doing with, for instance, sharing your political opinions. Although you said it's saturated already and it's like a popular topic, but I think these might be some thoughts from my side based on a wonderful interview. So I'd say, except you want to add something, maybe how people can connect with you.
Sure. Well,
and what's your
obviously-
telephone number and your address?
Yeah, so everyone can do that. Okay, well, our business address. So obviously the company.
How can I? So for instance, we started chatting, I think, via direct messages
Right.
on Substack, which is amazing. So your direct messages are still open. For instance, I closed mine to paid subscribers, and this is how I found out that you became a paid subscriber, which I thought was amazing. And then I read your Substack. I don't know where it started, but I had already read your Substack story there, and I was like, oh, okay, this this is something, definitely. And I think also based on your experience and everything and the decades of working, with thought leaders and, I don't know, presidents or whatever,
Yes, exactly.
FBI agents and so on. I think this is, amazing. And I wish you all the best also for your agency and everything. So one more time, how do you think at the moment people can connect with you?
If they want, they can reach out to me at editor@thelongmemo for email. I am on Substack. You can message me on Substack. I reply to people who are not crazy on Substack. Okay.
Otherwise, you're going to block them.
Otherwise you got to block them. And I actually
Report.
said these are the rules. Okay. You can't attack each other. You can't, I have a whole list of rules. I'm like, look, you want to fight with me? That's fine. We can have that discussion, but you can't fight each other. Nobody's calling each other bad names, all that good stuff. Right. So, because politics, sometimes people come unglued. But yes, editor at The Long Memo, and then on Substack, The Long Memo does have its own domain, so it is www.thelongmemo. And the other one, which will have its own domain here down the road, if you want to read the other publication, it's called Red, White, and Fled. It's also on Substack. And the interesting thing is, if you become a paid subscriber at Red, White, and Fled, I'm actually giving you paid subscription to The Long Memo as well. Okay.
Oh,
so because now it doesn't work the other way. It doesn't work the other way. Okay. But it does work because Red, White, and Fled is considerably more expensive than The Long Memo. But Red, White, and Fled is all about the mechanics of Americans that are looking at getting second citizenship and living abroad and things like that. So that material is a lot more intellectually valuable. That's why it's got a higher subscription cost. But I'm like, okay, you know what? You decide to invest in that. Yeah, I'll give you access to the commentary stuff at The Long Memo for free. Or not for free, bundled. And I wish Substack would allow that, quite honestly. So the next time you talk to Substack, ask them to allow bundling.
Yeah, I've seen this bundle already. If you a few weeks back, I subscribed to a Substack newsletter, and suddenly I was seeing like something like a bundle, meaning like that I then would also get 20% off another newsletter.
No, I'm not talking
like
about 20% off or something like that. In my case, you pay for a paid subscription.
I get it.
At Red, White, and Fled. I'm giving you a year comped at The Long Memo.
Mm.
Okay.
But you can automate this,
Yes, you can. I would just like Substack to bundle it all at once.
Yeah, sure.
So anyway, but yes, you can go to Red, White, and Fled. You can go to The Long Memo. You can email email editor at The Long Memo, and you can just DM me on Substack, or you can respond to anything I'm publishing. And again, as long as you're not a lunatic, I respond to people who ask intelligent questions on all our content.
Yeah. And help you build this thriving and healthy email list. However, one more question after all this, what we covered today already is, what is your goal then with your Substack newsletter? We were talking about vision, mission. Of course, you're telling me that you want to empower people, make them smarter, something like this, make them think. not this,
Yeah.
you should do this, not that
So
thing.
where is it?
However, is it about monetary? Is it about, can I like not game, but can I play this game? Or is it just to be on this buzzy platform? What is it about
At
for
this
you
point,
then? Is it
I would like Borderless Media, and my Substacks to generate enough money that they are legitimate, viable businesses in and of their own right and not just hobbies.
I see.
I would like to be able to pay other smart people to create content along with me. Right now, I'm taking people who I think are interesting and giving them access to the long memo through cross posting and guest posting.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Why? Again, I'm curating it because they're of interest. They have interesting ideas for my audience. Okay. So I curate others and I'm like, hey, I've got an audience. You don't. Because that's in part why I did the recommendations and who would you like me to read from readers. And I was like, and look, don't recommend to me Bob Reich and, Tim Snyder and people like that. I already know who they are and they don't need
Yeah.
my help. Who do you like that would benefit from an engaged audience that the long memo has? Okay. So I would like to see that trend continue. In my mind, to be a viable business, um, in its own right, it's got to be generating between $40,000 and $70,000 a month.
A month.
Yeah.
I see. Wow. And
Okay.
is then your vision to like sell your ad agency and then go all in
No,
on your
no,
newsletter
not
or something, or would it
necessarily.
be
Not
another income
necessarily. It
stream?
would be another income stream. So
Yeah.
then, you're $500,000, $750,000 as a Substack, which honestly I don't think is. When I say this, I may sound like a dick. It's not that hard to achieve, in my opinion. Okay. It may be hard for a lot of people to figure out, but if you can figure out the content that works and consistently get subscribers and consistently get paying subscribers, well, then shit, it just becomes a conversion optimization problem. Now, since I solve that all day long as an advertising guy, that's not a complicated problem for me. Now, I haven't totally figured it out yet for the long memo or for Red, White, and Fled, but I ultimately will. So, yeah, my vision is building something at that level. Now, to do that, using my constraint model, to do that, I have to deliver content that consistently delights and engages my audience. That's the really hard part in all this. Okay. Right now, it's a passion for me. It's a hobby. It's expensive. If I'm really going to do it at scale, well, then I need professional individuals. I need professional editors. I need professional writers. I need people who can produce podcast episodes and everything else. You got to then build the content, but it doesn't happen overnight. PewDiePie didn't go from 0 to 15 million people overnight. So there's a process you go through as a creator too. And I'm in the beginning stages of that. And I can't complain too much given how it's been going. So yeah, for me, somewhere between 40 and 70,000 a month, I'm like, okay, well now this is a legitimate concern. So that's 12,500 paid subscribers. That
Hmm.
means Long
It's
Memo is
possible.
going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 100,000 readers,
Yeah.
right? Or maybe 150,000 or 175,000. Well, I mean, there are Substacks that are that big that are not necessarily marquee names. Okay. So that's possible. You get there, yeah, then it becomes its own stream. Now for Red, White, and Fled, maybe there will be guides and consulting and things like that could go on, but nobody wants guides and consulting and all the ancillary kind of things about how to think about politics. I mean, although I suppose
I know.
one thought
Doesn't
I
fit.
had was you could essentially sell, for the, and I don't see anybody doing this, but I think you could sell. I mean, my expertise is basically analyzing geopolitical risk. Well,
Hmm.
there are firms that do that for a living. Okay. And so you could do that on Substack. You could basically be your own think tank
Hmm.
on Substack and thus offer research reports and things like that as private intelligence, which businesses do, which hedge funds, investment groups, family offices, things like that, they will buy expert content on a subscription. Okay, so that would be something maybe the long memo could do. But I'm like, you got to really have an established track record of getting it right
Mm.
to make that make sense. But yeah, you can go beyond. You can go beyond. But that's what I see for the company. But right now, I just want to keep the rate at 100 new subscribers a day, which tells me I'm going the right direction, and people continuing to pay for it, which tells me we're going the right direction.
Cool. And how much money do you want to hit per month at the end of the year?
Well, by the end of the year, I'd like to see it at, well, I mean, if I'm going to be honest, I want to see it at that $500,000 a year annualized income mark by the end of the year, which means, you know, 40,
Wow. Then we
50,000.
definitely have to have another interview on this,
Yeah, right.
Mr.
If I do
Anonymous.
it, if I
Yeah.
do it, well, I have a suspicion you can help me more than I can help you on that. But because I'm very good at getting paid subscribers, making them, or very good at getting free subscribers, not as good at getting them paid. And I have a suspicion it's about the story I'm telling with respect to the value. And I also have a
Mhm.
suspicion it's because I've given away a lot of value for free.
I see. Yeah, of course. If you want to, of course, we
Yes.
can do another call and then talk
Yes.
about this. I'd say now, it was super delightful to talk with
It was
you.
great to talk to
So many
you.
insights. Definitely made me rethink the whole strategy on Substack and beyond. And I think so many many people can relate to this and now also feel inspired to rethink their strategy.
Yes.
Thank
Well,
you so
thank
so
you for
much.
having me. I appreciate it. And anytime, Christina, reach out.